Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to teach you how to simplify powers, but before I start, just remember after you watch this video there is a link in the description which takes you to this page where you can have a go at 10 questions and you can see how many you get right. But let's get into simplifying powers and how to do that. And I'm going to go through the three basic rules and then we'll look at some variations of that. So we're going to look at when you multiply something, and before we start I'm just going to use some notation, some description of key things. Okay, so first of all, these are called the powers, but whatever you're raising to a particular power, i.e. this thing down here, that's called the base. Okay, so that's called a base, and technically the power is called an exponent. That's another name for it, but we call it powers. But the thing at the bottom is called the base. Okay, now whenever you're multiplying something that has the same base, what do you do with the powers? Okay, and that's what we're going to look at. Now, first of all, I'm going to tell you the answer, and then maybe you can figure out how you get the answer. It's really easy. But when you're multiplying something, you just do this. It's a to the power of 14. Okay, well, how do you get that? Well, all we've done is we've added the powers together. That's literally what we've done, is we've added the power. So rule number one is when you're multiplying something that has the same base, you just add the powers together. Okay, so by the way, if it was a to the power of 10 times a to the power of 4 times a to the power of 2, then that would be a to the power of 16. You just add all the powers together. But if it was a different base, for example, if that was a I don't know, x to the power of 4 times a to the power of 10, then you can't add the powers there. It's got to be the same base. Okay. But the question is, why is that? Okay, so, and this is why. I'm going to explain on the right-hand side why that is. Okay, if I write a to the power 10 out in full, then it would be something like this. It'd be a times a times a times a. That's four of them. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, that is a to the power of 10 written out in full. Okay, and then let's write a to the power of 4 after it, but we're going to copy that times sign first of all. So times a to the power of 4, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, if you look at this rather large expression, how many a's are there? Well, there's 14 of them. A to the power of 14 is how you'd write this thing here in shorthand. And this is, so instead of writing this humongous expression here, the simplistic thing to do is just add the powers together because it's equivalent. But if we were to check that, okay, first of all, it's not going to write, it's not converted that problem. Let me cross that out. But this is the answer. If we check that, okay, that is the answer. So remember, when you're multiplying something that has the same base, you just add the powers together. Okay, let's look at the next one. Okay, this one here, you're dividing, and I think you could probably guess what the answer would be here. It would be a to the power of 6. And the rule is, obviously, if you're dividing, you subtract the powers. So 10 take away 4 is 6. So it's a to the power of 10, and you take away the 4. And this is what it would be. But let me explain to you why that is. Okay, so on the top of the fraction is a to the power of 10. So let me write it properly. A times a times a times a times a. How many is that? 5. We need 5 more. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Now it's not going to like those x's, but... And on the bottom it's a times a times a times a. There's 4 of them. But remember, when you're dividing things and you've got a string of multiplications on top and a string of multiplications on the bottom, you can cancel things out. So what's happening here is this a is cancelling that a out, this a is cancelling that a out, this a is cancelling this one out, and this one's cancelling this one out. So what's left is these 6 a's here. That is literally what's left. Okay? But if you write that in shorthand, that is a to the power of 6. Okay, so this is why it simplifies that, because those a's cancel those a's out on the top. And if we were to check that, okay, that does not look right to me. Let me delete that and write it bigger. A to the power of 6. Okay, if we check that, that is the answer. Okay, let's look at, so rule number 2 was if you're dividing, you subtract the powers. Okay, let's look at rule number 3, which is to do with brackets. And let me tell you the answer first of all. So this expression is equivalent to this expression here, a to the power 12. And you may be thinking, how did he get that? Well, you simply multiply the powers together. So rule number 3 is if you have brackets, you just multiply the powers, multiply powers together. And that's literally what you do, you just multiply the powers together. But let me explain to you why that is. Okay, inside the bracket we've got a to the power of 4. But on the outside we are cubing that. Now what does it mean when we cube something? It means we're literally multiplying it out 3 times. So what are we multiplying out 3 times? Well, we're multiplying whatever's inside the bracket out 3 times. So doing a to the power of 4 times a to the power of 4 times a to the power of 4. That's what we're doing. So that's what the cube is telling us to do. It's telling us to take this thing inside and multiply it out 3 times. And here we go. Here it is. But what does rule number 1 say? Rule number 1 says if you're multiplying things, you add the powers together. So what we're going to do is add the powers. But 4 add 4 add 4 is 12. And that is the answer. Now, okay, that's the answer. We've simplified it. So rule number 3 is you multiply the powers when you have brackets. Okay, now let's look at a combination of all those there. Here is a combination of all those rules. But this A may confuse you because there's no power written there. If there's no power written there, by default, it's a 1. Okay, so let's look at this expression. So how do we simplify it? First of all, we'll start with the thing on the inside. Okay, we'll simplify that. That's a to the power of 9. Okay, and then we've got a 3 there. Now on the bottom, well, let's simplify that there. We're multiplying those two things. So that's a to the power of 4. Remember, we add the powers. Okay, now we're not done yet. Let me actually cross off that divide line because it's fairly large. I don't need all of that. Okay, it's not disappearing. Okay, so a to the power of 9 cubed over a to the power of 4. Okay, but on the top, we can multiply those powers and get rid of that bracket. So it's a to the power of 27. A to the power of 4. Because we're dividing, we can take away the powers. So that's a cubed. Sorry, not a cubed. 27 take away 4 is a to the power of 23. So this is the answer. Now, I'm not going to like that. Let me cross that out and put a 9. Okay. So let's check that. Okay, and there you go. So you've used all the rules. Okay, let's look at something else. This one here is a little bit different because we've got some numbers in front of the letters. Okay. Now, when we're multiplying expressions, we always add the powers if it's the same base, but if you have numbers involved, you should treat them as regular numbers here. So what we're going to do is just going to multiply those two numbers together. So that's just 15. Those two numbers are called coefficients. They're not powers. Anything in front of the letter is called a coefficient. So you just treat them as regular, and because we're multiplying these two expressions there, we're just going to multiply the coefficients together. That's where the 15 comes from. But the a to the power of 4 times a to the power of 7, we can treat that as we do with powers. And because it's the same base, we add the powers together. So that's a to the power of 11. Now this is a simplified expression. And that is your answer. Okay, so remember, coefficients, you treat them as regular, so you multiply coefficients. But powers, you add powers when you're multiplying. Okay, so it can confuse people sometimes. Okay, this one's similar, but we've got a division involved. So that 10 and that 5 is coefficients, so we treat them as normal. So what's 10 divided by 5? Well, that's 2. Okay, but the b cubed divided by b squared, we take away the powers, so 3 take away 2 is 1. That's b to the power of 1, but we don't need to write the 1. We never write the 1 in a power. So it's just b to the power of 1. And if we check that, that is the final answer, 2b. Okay, let's do another one. Okay, this one's a bit tricky. Okay, the 8 over 12. I'm just going to separate that first. 8 divided by 12. If you look at that fraction, that simplifies to 2/3. So we've got a 2/3. Okay, but the b to the power of 4 over b to the power of 1, that's b cubed. So you take away the powers, and remember that's a 1 there. 4 take away 1 is 3, but that b cubed has to go on top because you've got more b's on the top than the bottom. So it's b cubed on the top. So this is what it simplifies to, 2b cubed over 3. And there's your simplified one. Okay, this one here, let's look at this one here. First of all, I'm going to ignore that 2 on the outside, that power 2. I'm just going to sort that bit out on the inside. Okay, so the 6 is going to multiply the 2, that's going to give me 12. The a squared times a cubed, that's going to give me a to the power of 5. And this is what we are now simplifying. Now, this is what happens here. That 12 is going to get squared. Okay, so the 12 is a number, and we're going to square it to get 100. Oops, let me hide that. 144. Okay, 12 squared is 144. But this 5 is a power, and it's going to multiply this power here. So we're going to have an a to the power of 10. Okay, because powers get multiplied, but the numbers get squared or cubed or whatever that power is on the outside. That's what happens to it. So if we now check that, okay, that's the answer, 144 a to the power of 10. So that's the final example there. So what I suggest you do is now have a go at the questions in the description. So click the link, it takes you to this page where you can have a go at 10 questions, and let's see if you can get those 10 questions right. Okay, now don't forget, please like and subscribe this video. It would really help me out if you do that. And remember, my website, there's quite a few questions now. I'm making questions as I go along, so when you're done with this one, move on to the next exercise and let's see how well you do on this. And remember, each time you do an exercise, you are mastering that skill. You are getting that skill 100% right. Okay, so thank you very much for watching, guys.